Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial, and this is the 12th instalment in the series Expresso Nuts and Bolts. In this one we're going to be taking a look at another of the system presets which we've not used before, and that's going to be the angle difference node. That's what we're going to be about in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. I'll start by switching to my top view, so F2, and we'll zoom in a little closer to the grid. Grab a hold of the spline pen tool and we'll also switch on snapping. Grid work plane, we'll snap that on and let's see how we go from here. And we can see that we're going to get the result that we want, so we can just escape from there. First thing I'm going to do is make the arrows. So we'll start here. Come over to about here, I think will be okay. Down to here. And we'll create the arrow shape. I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's just go back a little bit. What I want to do, I think, is bring that maybe to here. Make it a little bit slimmer. That's okay. And if we need to, we can just make an adjustment. It might actually be there. That'll do there, I think. If we just go to there, go up to there, then we can just escape and select the spline here. Let's just take that one away. I don't want that one. Select this spline here and just move this point until it snaps to where it needs to snap to. Let's just go into our snapping grid plane, make it grid point, and we'll just see if we can snap that. That's it, we can snap that to there. So that's our first arrow, well, our arrow spline created. We need two of these, so we'll command drag to create a second one. Drop that one up there, and then all we've got to do is place these into extrudes, and then we can think about placing them in the scene. So let's just move our first spline out of the way. Just come back into model mode and just move this over here for now. Select both of them, hold down the option key and drop them into extrudes. As per usual, much too big in the offset. We'll make that about 10. Could even make it 5. That'll probably do nicely, I should think. And then in our caps, we can put a little bit of rounding on it. We'll make it, say, 0.5. That should do nicely for us, and I think that's great. We've got our two arrows. So now we can think about what we're going to do with these. We can, if we go back into our top view again, so F2, we can think about placing them. If we just move this one over to here and our second arrow just over to here, so they're plus 50 and minus 50. That I think will do fine for what we need. Go back to our 3D view, so F1, hit H to see everything that's going on. Yeah, I think that's fine. That looks really good. The next thing to do is to rotate these so that they're facing each other. So let's see where we are in our coordinates, and rotation H, if we go minus 90, and this one can be 90. They're now facing each other, that's fine. And then what we need to do is drop in some null objects. We need to drop these into nulls. So we'll hold down our option key and drop this into a null. Same thing, just drop that into a null. And let's see where we are. So our nulls are facing in the correct directions because of course they follow the directions of the extrudes. So now our extrude here is at 0, which is what we want, and our extrude here is also at 0. That's going to be important because we will want that. So we can call this left arrow, and this one can be called right arrow, and we'll call this just left, and this one right. That's perfectly good for us. So our arrows are in place. The next thing we can think about doing is dropping in a cylinder. So let's get a hold of one of those and drop it in. It's much too big. So we need to come into our object tab, say about 20 for the radius. Height 50, I think that'll do fine. Might even go a little bit lower, but I think 50 should be, yeah, I think 50 is going to be okay. That'll do nicely. In our coordinates, we'll move it up by 25 so that it's sitting basically at floor level. That's fine. I mean, we've not got any floor in, and I'm not going to put one in, but it's sitting at floor level, so that's perfectly good. Now the cylinder, let's have a look. We don't want 4 height segments, we just want 1. We can leave the rotation segments at 16 for what this is, it doesn't really matter. We'll hit C to make it editable. Just change the display to Garrod lines and isopalms. And now we can think about working with this a little bit more. So what we can do is select our polygon mode, UL, and select the top. I for inset, and we can come in 1 centimetre, possibly a bit further than 1. I think we can probably get away with 2. Let's go 2 centimetres in, and then D for extrude, and it will be minus, and it will be 49. And that gives us an open cylinder, which is what we want. Just hit H there in my right hand view, which is of course F3. And we can see that that's going to be okay. Next thing to do is bring in a second cylinder. So we'll bring one of those in. Again, it's far too big. It only wants to be a tiny amount in the height, so probably about 2, I think, will do for that. That's fine. And in the radius, something like 18. Let's just move it. In fact, we'll drop it into our original cylinder and zero it out. Zero that out. And we'll place it at 24 in the height. Let's have a look and see what we've got. I think that's looking good. Yeah, that's looking really good. What's it got height segments wise? Let's have a look. We've got 4 in there. We only want 1 for a start. We'll just do that. I think that's okay. I think that will work for us. Now, this cylinder is currently, let's have a look where it is in our coordinates. It's at 24. If we put it at 0, it's not going to be in the right place. So what we need to do is set it up so that we can zero it out, and we'll do that by dropping the cylinder into a null. And if we move the null downwards, we can say, let's have a look. I might as well do it by eye actually. If I just hit F3 to go back into my right hand view, I can drop this null down until it's just about touching the bottom. Doesn't have to be perfect, that's fine, we're not going to see that. So if we just round this down to minus 22, and our cylinder is now at 0. So when we raise our cylinder, we can work out how far it's going to go. So it's going to go to somewhere around there, which we could say is 45. 45 will be enough. We could go 46 if we wanted to. That will be fine. I think 46 will work perfectly well. So that's what we need. We're going to be going from 0 to 46. So make sure you bear that in mind and make a note of it, because we'll need it later. Let's just put it back to 0. In fact, I won't put it back to 0. I'll leave it there because I've got to get some text. So let's get a text spline. Drop that in. Way too big, of course. Let's make it something like 20. May even need to go smaller than that, but we will drop the text into our null and zero out. Okay, and we can then set our text up from here. So in our object, I'm going to make it middle. Just bring that up so that it's somewhere on top of there. And then we can just change this. I'm going to just say EM. I will also change the typeface to copper plate. You can, of course, put whatever you like. It doesn't have to be EM. You can put your own initials in there if you wish to. So let's do that. And that looks okay to me. That looks as if that's going to work out okay. It needs positioning correctly, but that's okay. Now let's just drop this into our cylinder, and we'll hold the option key down and drop it into an extrude. Once again, way too big. Let's make that something like, I don't know, try 10. Yeah, 10. Yeah, it's okay. Perhaps a little bit less. Go 8. That'll be okay, I think. And then we can simply F2 again to go into our top view and just move that back until it sits by eye just about in the middle of there. And let's see where we are here. Let's go into our right hand view, so F3, and just drop this down. Go one more. Again, I'm not doing this with absolute precision, it's fine the way it is. Right, so things are set up, and now we can think about making something work here. We'll just call this extrude EM so that we know what it is. Okay, brilliant. So that's all looking good. So we've got our cylinder there. We can take this null out of the cylinder because we don't want that in there. That's the cylinder that we're moving up and down in, or will be moving up and down inside. So that's all good. Let's have a look. So we've got a null there. I've got a cylinder here. When I move my cylinder, everything else moves, and that's what I want. We can just get rid of the snapping now. Brilliant. So that's all going to work. So let's zero this cylinder out so that it's at the bottom of the cylinder, or the other cylinder. we could call that cylinder, I suppose, a platform to make it distinguishable. Right, fantastic. So the next thing then that we can worry about will be Expresso. We actually require 2 Expresso expressions in order to make this work. Our first expression will be concerned with making our arrows rotate around their rotation H coordinate. That's what we're going to be using this over here. And they're just going to oscillate backwards and forwards. That's what they're going to do. And we want them to actually end up pointing directly at the cylinder. So if we just hit F2 to go into our top view, hit H so that we can see, they're going to be pointing at the cylinder over here, so diagonally, and they're going to be pointing at angles of 45 and minus 45 degrees respectively, because of course at the moment they're both zeroed out as we've got them grouped into null objects. So that's the important point to make there. Let's go back into our 3D view, so F1. We'll bring in a null, we'll call it Expresso, give it a programming tag, Expresso tag, and then we've got our editor open and we're ready to start. The first thing to bring in will be a time node. So we'll bring in one of those, and on this occasion I won't actually remove the time port, but I will actually add a frame port. Just swap those over. Okay, that's how I need that set up. Moving on from here, I need a modulo, so I'll bring in a math node, come down to calculate math, bring that in, change the function to modulo. What we're interested in here is plumbing in the frame node into our first input, into input 1. Our modulo value, I'm going to be using 110. That's what I've found is quite a sweet spot for this. I'll then bring in a compare, and the output of my modulo I'll plumb into input 1. Input 2, what we're actually going to be comparing to is less than or equal to, and it will be, or rather it won't be that actually, beg your pardon, it will be not equal to, and it will be not equal to 0. That's what we're interested in here. We can then bring in a monoflop. Let's just grab a hold of one of those. And we will use the output of the compare to trigger this monoflop. Now the monoflop needs to be a one-shot monoflop, because obviously we're going to be getting a 1 at the output stage here when our condition is satisfied. So that will work nicely. The next thing we need to do is bring in our time node, time node's time output, into the time input of the monoflop, and our duration for the monoflop will need to be 110. And we also need a state output port, because we're going to be driving a range mapper. and that is going to be the next node that we bring in. So again, we'll come down to calculate, and it will be range mapper. We'll bring in one of those. In our range mapper, the data type will be real. The input range we can leave as user defined. That's perfectly good for us. But the output range we must change to radians. That's really important. We've got to change that to radians, and we can do that right now. Use spline is fine, that's good. Now the input lower, in fact if we plumb in the state into the input, that makes things a little bit less confusing. So the input lower will be 0, of course. Input upper will be 1 because we get a value between 0 and 1 coming out of here. Output lower, that's fine as 0. The output upper we need to change, and that needs to be 0 point, and it will be 7854. Okay, so that's the output for us there, and that equates to 45 degrees, which is what we want. And then in our spline we need to set this up, so we'll command click to set our first point. That needs to be at 0 and 0 for the X and Y. Our next point we can just bring up to 1 in the Y and 0.2 in the X. Again, command click to create another point, 1 in the Y, 0.8 along the X. And then finally, our last point needs to be 1 and 0. So 1 in the X, 0 in the Y. And let's have a look at our tangents. So what we got here, we've got 0.25. Therefore, we'll put minus 0.25 in there. And minus 0.25 there. And the same here, minus 0.25. And that makes everything even and working exactly the way we want it. So that's our range mapper taken care of, and we can move on from here. The next thing to bring in will be our left arrow, or left, we'll bring that in. So we'll bring that one in there, and our right we'll bring in as well. They both need rotation H. Let's make sure, rotation H, that's it. And rotation H for this one too. So both have rotation H at the input stage. And let's just see what's going on here. If I plumb this into my left arrow, if we run the timeline, let's see what's happening. So we can see that that's working okay. We do need some more frames. We'll make it 1,000 frames. Give us plenty to work with. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, so that's fine. That's behaving as I want it to behave. So with our right arrow here, we've obviously got to make this rotate in the opposite direction. So we need a negate node. So we'll come down to calculate and grab a hold of a negate node, and we can plumb this output from our range mapper into the gates input. Just move things over a little bit so that we're not quite as cluttered. And then the output of the gate can go into the rotation H of our right arrow, and you can already see that that's doing what it needs to do. So if we just close this, zero things out, and then play, we can now see that our arrows are behaving as we need them to behave. They rotate, they pause, and they rotate back to their start position. And that's exactly what we want them to do. If we just switch to F2, we can see that they're pointing directly at the cylinder. So that's fantastic. We've got it that far. We can move on from here then and get the next Expresso expression going. Let's reach for our tag menu, get another Expresso tag, just move that to there. And we've got the editor open and we're ready to start work. Now the first two things we need to bring in are our left and our right. So we'll bring those in and set them up with rotation H ports at the output stages. Just Command double click to make them a little bigger, and we're ready to go. Now we can reach for our system presets and bring in the all-important node, which is going to be the angle difference node, which is under calculations. So that's the node that we're bringing in. Okay, well, let's take a quick look at it. We've got angle 1 and angle 2 at the input stage. We can put other stuff in there if we wish to, but we don't want to. We just want angle 1 and angle 2. And at the output stage, again, we can put a variety of output ports there if we wish to, but we're just interested in the difference angle, so we don't need to change anything. We can plumb the left into angle 1, the right into angle 2, and we're ready to work from here. The next thing we will bring in is a degree node, so I'll come down to calculate degree and bring one of these in. We don't have to do this, but as many of you will know, I prefer working with degrees. So I'll bring one of those in, and we'll also bring in a result node, and we'll see what we're getting. So if we bring in our result and we plumb the output in there, straight away we're getting minus 16.337. That's our current result. And that's because our arrows are not zeroed out. If we just bring this back to 0, we get 0. That's what we're getting. So if we just play forwards, we're getting minus 90 when they're both pointing directly at the cylinder. So minus 90 is quite an important angle for us. But to be more specific, I may not actually use minus 90, I may use minus 89, depending on whether we get the result that we want. So bear that in mind. We won't get rid of the result node for now, we'll just move it up here and leave it there. Let's get a compare node, bring one of those in, and plumb the output of the degree node into input 1. We'll compare to less than or equal to, because it's going to be a minus, so it will be minus, we'll put minus 90 for now, and we'll see if this does work. Once again, we'll bring in a time node, so grab a hold of one of those, and we'll leave it set up because it doesn't need a frame node, it just needs the time node because we're going to be using it with a monoflop, which we're going to be bringing in right now. So let's get one of those. The trigger once again will be the output from the compare, and we will make this a one-shot monoflop again because we're going to be getting a 1 when this is satisfied. The time we can plug into the time, and the duration will make 90 on this occasion. We'll need a state at the output stage, and then we can bring in another range mapper. Come down to calculate and bring that in. Okay, so in our range mapper we can once again plug the state from the monoflop into the input. As before, the input lower and input upper will be 0 and 1. Our output lower will be 0, and remember earlier I said that we were going to move our platform from 0 to 46. Well, 46 will therefore be our output upper. We can then think about working with our spline, so I'll command click to place the first point. 0, 0 is where it needs to be. Our second point we'll place at point 1 and 1. Our third point will be at 1 on the Y, point 6 along the X, and then finally command click and place this one at 1 in the X and 0 in the Y. We can now take a look at our tangents. These will want to be minus 0.25, and what's this one? That will be minus 0.25. This will be minus 0.25, and this 0.25 when it is. So that's fine. That's set up as I want this to be. So I want the thing to shoot up quite quickly. I want it to pause and then drop down at a slower rate. That's what I'm aiming for here. So finally, all we need to bring in is our platform. We'll bring that in, and it will want to be position Y. That's what we're interested in. So we'll bring that into there. double click on that, and that's our expression complete. Now let's see if we get what we want. If we don't, we'll change this compare and we'll change it to -89, but let's see if we do get what we want. Well, EM's come up there. No, we're getting what we want. But let's let it run and see what happens. I just want to make sure that there's no glitching. So far, so good. Well, that ran for 1,000 frames and that did very well. When I made this before, I found that I occasionally got glitching. I did have a few more frames, and you may find that if you let it run for longer that you will get a bit of a glitch. If you do, I'll show you the it's not really a workaround, it's just the way to correct the problem. In the range mapper, all you need to do is clamp lower and upper, and that will solve any glitching problems that you do get. So it's worth just making a note of that. Let's just go back, and this will still work fine. So yes, all looking really good. So the angle difference node can be used as a trigger so that when you get a certain value you can make something happen, as we're doing here. Also though, you can pass the actual angle that comes out of here. If we just switch on the animation refresh, you can see what's going on. So this angle can be passed. You can use it to transform objects, so you could pass it to the rotation of another object, and of course you could use it as a position value as well. So it's quite a versatile node actually. This is just one example of what you can do with it. There's plenty more, so I'm hoping that you'll play around with it and see what you can come up with. But anyway, that completes this tutorial, because that's what I wanted to show you in this one, and it is only a quick tutorial really. So as always, I really hope you've got something out of watching this video, and that you've got a technique or two here that you can use in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like, and of course if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment and ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, then please do share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that about wraps this one up. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.